In the bustling city of Lagos, life had not been kind to Jane. Once a promising young woman with dreams of making something great out of her life, she had lost everything: her family, her home, and any hope of a bright future. Misfortune had struck her like a relentless storm, leaving her stranded with no one to turn to. Desperate to survive, Jane found herself on the streets, begging just outside a luxury restaurant. She chose that spot intentionally, believing that the wealthy customers dining there might take pity on her and offer her some money. Every day, she sat on the pavement, watching elegantly dressed men and women step out of their expensive cars, laughing as they entered the grand establishment. She wondered what it felt like to sit at one of those tables, enjoying a warm meal. But for now, all she could do was hope for kindness. Each day was a battle against hunger and humiliation, but Jane had grown used to it. The stares of passers-by no longer stung as much, and the rejection from those who ignored her pleas for help had become a painful but familiar routine. Still, deep inside, she longed for a way out, a second chance at life. However, on this particular evening, something unusual caught her attention inside the restaurant. Through the large glass windows, she saw a well-dressed young man, probably in his mid-30s, kneeling before a stunning woman in a flowing red gown. The restaurant buzzed with excitement as customers turned their attention to the romantic scene unfolding before them. Laughter and clinking glasses faded into an expectant silence as all eyes focused on the couple. Jane watched closely, momentarily forgetting her own struggles. The man, whose name she later heard was David, held out a small box, revealing a sparkling engagement ring. His eyes shone with hope and love as he gazed up at the woman, Daniela, waiting for her response. Daniela gasped, her expression unreadable. The anticipation in the restaurant was almost tangible. Staff and diners alike leaned in, eager to hear her answer. For a moment, Jane felt a strange connection to the scene before her. A proposal should be a joyful moment, but something about Daniela's reaction sent a shiver down Jane's spine. The whole restaurant seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her response. But instead of the joyous yes everyone expected, Daniela's face darkened with disappointment. A deep frown settled on her once beaming face, and she abruptly pulled her hand away. The entire restaurant fell into silence as she crossed her arms and exclaimed, "Why are you proposing to me with this cheap ring? If you will not use a 3 million naira ring to propose to me, then forget about it." Gasps echoed across the room. Whispers spread like wildfire among the shocked diners, their faces painted with disbelief. Some shook their heads, while others murmured in disapproval. A proposal was supposed to be about love, not price tags, yet Daniela had reduced it to mere material value. David stood frozen, his knee still on the floor, his face a mix of heartbreak and humiliation. His hand, which had held the ring so proudly moments ago, now trembled. The sparkle in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a storm of anger and pain. Without another word, he slowly got to his feet, his jaw clenched. Then, in a swift motion, he flung the ring outside in frustration. The small box soared through the air, disappearing into the darkness beyond the restaurant doors. Muttering under his breath, David turned sharply, ignoring the murmurs and judgmental stares around him. His heart pounded in his chest as he stormed out of the restaurant, his mind clouded with pain and betrayal. Jane, who had been watching everything unfold, quickly scrambled to find the ring. Her heart pounded as she spotted it near the pavement, glinting under the streetlights. Without hesitation, she picked it up and sprinted toward the parking lot, where David was about to drive off. Panting, she knocked on his car window, clutching the ring tightly in her hand. "Sir, your ring," she said breathlessly. David hesitated for a moment before rolling down his window. His face was still clouded with frustration and heartbreak. He barely glanced at the ring before waving a dismissive hand. "Keep it. Sell it if you want." I bought it for 600,000 naira, but it's worthless now. Jane shook her head firmly and held the ring out toward him. I saw everything, and I know this must hurt. But don't give up. If she truly loves you, she will come around. Don't let this moment define you. David sighed, taking a long look at her. Something about Jane's sincerity struck a chord in him. He had expected pity or mockery, but instead, she had offered him kindness. Without a word, he reached into his wallet, pulled out a few crisp naira notes, and handed them to her before driving off into the night. Jane stood there, watching his car disappear into the distance. She looked down at the money in her trembling hands. Hunger gnawed at her. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. The aroma of grilled chicken and fried rice from the restaurant behind her made her stomach ache even more. But something deep inside told her not to spend it on food. This was an opportunity, a rare moment she couldn't waste. Clutching the money tightly, an idea sparked in her mind, one that could change everything. Determined to turn her life around, Jane headed straight to the bustling market, ignoring the hunger that gnawed at her stomach. She wandered through the crowded stalls until she found a vendor selling fresh oranges in bulk. With careful negotiation, she managed to buy as many as the money could afford, ensuring she had enough to start a small trade. Balancing the weight of the oranges in a worn-out basket, she made her way to a busy roadside corner where passers-by frequently stopped. It wasn't much, but it was a start. With a deep breath, she arranged the oranges neatly, hoping to attract buyers. As the sun blazed overhead, Jane called out to potential customers with a hopeful smile. Though she was still homeless, she no longer felt hopeless. For the first time in a long while, she had taken a step toward something better, toward reclaiming her life. At first, customers ignored her. They saw her as just another street vendor. Some passers-by recognized her as the beggar who used to sit by the restaurant, whispering among themselves. But Jane didn't care. She was no longer a beggar, she was a businesswoman, determined to change her story. Days turned into weeks, and her persistence began to pay off. With each sunrise, she arranged her oranges neatly, greeting customers with a warm smile. People soon noticed how fresh and sweet her oranges were, and word spread quickly. Before long, her small roadside stall became a popular spot. More customers stopped by daily, and she found herself selling out faster than she had imagined. Jane felt something she hadn't in a long time: hope. This was just the beginning of her journey. One afternoon, as Jane wiped sweat off her forehead, a sleek black car pulled up beside her stall. The sun was scorching, and the scent of fresh oranges filled the air. She raised her head and recognized the car immediately. David. Her heart gave a small leap, but she quickly composed herself. The driver's door swung open, and David stepped out, dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark trousers. His presence, as always, carried an air of confidence. He flashed a smile. Wow. You're selling oranges now? Jane beamed, pride evident in her eyes. Yes, sir. Thanks to you. I used the money you gave me to start this business. David chuckled, shaking his head. No need to call me sir. Just call me David. His gaze lingered on her, filled with admiration. You're a smart and hard-working woman. You'll go far in life. Jane lowered her gaze, her fingers idly arranging the oranges. Life has taught me lessons I never imagined. I had to learn and grow. David nodded, understanding her unspoken words. By the way, Daniela came to my house today. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. She apologized and admitted she overreacted. Jane tilted her head, studying his expression. Did you forgive her? David sighed. Yes, I did. I still love her, and I really want to be with her. A gentle smile formed on Jane's lips. If she truly loves you too, she'll come around. David hesitated for a moment before reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a wad of cash and extended it toward her. Use this to grow your business. Jane's eyes widened. David, she paused, torn between pride and gratitude. Please, he insisted. I believe in you. After a brief hesitation, Jane accepted the money. Thank you, sir, oh David. He smiled, then stepped back toward his car. Take care, Jane. As he drove off, Jane clutched the money in her hand, a mix of emotions swirling within her. Days turned into weeks, and Jane's small business flourished. She expanded beyond selling just oranges, adding bananas, apples, and pineapples to her stall. With her growing profits, she secured a better spot in a busier area, attracting more customers. Every evening, as she counted her earnings, she felt a deep sense of pride. She was making something of herself. One afternoon, as she arranged a fresh batch of mangoes, a familiar black car pulled up. David stepped out, but this time, his usual confident demeanor was missing. His shoulders were slightly slumped, and a troubled look clouded his face. Jane frowned, wiping her hands on her apron. You look worried. What's wrong? David let out a heavy sigh. My boss, Mr. Benson, is hosting a housewarming party, and he wants me to bring my fiancée. It's a big deal. Being invited means he sees me as someone important. He paused, running a hand through his hair. I asked Daniela to come with me, but she said she's traveling that day. Then she asked for money to go shopping. Jane hesitated before speaking. I don't want to be harsh, but love isn't about money. If she truly cares for you, she'll support you, not just take from you. David opened his mouth to respond, but something caught his attention, faint bruises on Jane's face. His expression darkened. What happened to you? His voice was firm, laced with concern. Jane glanced away. Last night, some hoodlums attacked me. They beat me up and stole all my money. David clenched his fists. You sleep here? That's dangerous. I can't let you stay out here anymore. You're coming with me. Jane hesitated. David, I can't just. I won't take no for an answer. His tone left no room for argument. That night, Jane found herself stepping into David's home, a stunning, well-decorated mansion with high ceilings and plush furniture. He led her to a cozy guest room, and for the first time in months, Jane slept in a real bed, safe and warm. As the day of the party neared, Jane noticed that David's excitement seemed to be fading. He spent more time staring out the window, lost in thought, and his usual enthusiasm was nowhere to be seen. I won't go, he finally said, his voice filled with resignation. Daniela will be traveling, so what's the point? It won't be the same without her. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his expression. Jane, who had been quietly observing, looked at him firmly. I'll go with you. David's eyes widened in surprise. He blinked a few times, as if unsure if he had heard her correctly. You would do that? He asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Jane nodded, her gaze unwavering. I know it means something to you. You shouldn't let one person's absence stop you from going. David looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. All right, then. Let's go together. As days passed, David began to notice the same worn-out clothes Jane wore day after day. Her jeans were faded, her shirts frayed at the edges, and her shoes were old and scuffed. He couldn't ignore it any longer. Jane had been working tirelessly to build her business, and it pained him to see how little she treated herself. One morning, after a particularly long week, David made a decision. he took her to a boutique, determined to buy her some new outfits. Jane had been giving everything to everyone else. She deserved a little luxury, something just for herself. As they walked through the racks of clothing, David's eyes softened, enjoying watching Jane's excitement as she touched the fabric of beautiful dresses and blouses. But as they moved towards a different section, something caught his eye. Across the store, he saw his boss, Mr. Benson, standing closely to Daniela, too close. The way they stood, the laughter shared between them, made something in David twist uncomfortably. Rage boiled inside him. He felt betrayed, anger and disappointment mixing in his chest. Without thinking, he took a step forward, ready to confront Daniela. But before he could get any closer, Jane grabbed his arm, her grip firm but calm. "Not now. Not like this," she said softly, her voice steady yet kind. David clenched his fists, the fury still bubbling inside, but he stopped, the calmness in her voice forcing him to listen. On the night of the party, Jane stepped out of the car in a simple yet elegant black gown. The soft fabric clung to her silhouette, and her hair was styled in a graceful updo. David's jaw dropped when he saw her. His eyes widened with admiration. "You look stunning," he said, his voice barely a whisper. As they entered the grand hall, all eyes immediately turned to them. Whispers filled the air, and several guests looked on in awe, clearly admiring Jane's beauty. She felt a mix of nervousness and excitement but held her head high, walking confidently beside David. David introduced Jane to his boss, Mr. Benson, who smiled warmly. "David, your fiancée is beautiful." David turned to smile at Jane, but his expression froze. Across the room, standing close to Mr. Benson, was Daniela, right there, holding his arm. Gasps rippled through the room as David locked eyes with Daniela. Her face twisted in jealousy, and she immediately pointed at Jane with a sneer. "Who is this girl?" she demanded, her voice laced with disdain. David's voice was calm but firm, the weight of truth in every word. "She is the only woman who understands me with sincerity, unlike you, who betrayed me. You told me you were traveling today, but you were with my boss. You rejected my proposal because you're also dating him." The room fell deathly silent as Daniela's face turned pale. The truth was out, and the air was thick with tension. Mr. Benson, still processing the revelation, stepped forward. His face reddened with fury as he glared at Daniela, who stood frozen, humiliated. "Daniela," he said coldly, his voice cutting through the silence, "leave this party. Now." Daniela's eyes flickered with a mix of anger and shame, but she couldn't deny the weight of his command. Her eyes met David's one last time, but he didn't flinch. As she turned and stormed out, whispers filled the room, and David's gaze softened. Then, to everyone's surprise, David turned to Jane. Slowly, with a deep breath, he dropped to one knee. The same ring Daniela had rejected glinted in the light as he held it up. "Jane," he said, his voice filled with sincerity, "will you marry me?" Tears welled in Jane's eyes as she looked at the man who had truly loved her, offering her a future filled with care and trust. Her heart swelled with gratitude and joy. She whispered, her voice trembling, "Yes." Overcome with emotion, they embraced in a long, tender hug, feeling the warmth of their love. The next morning, there was a soft knock at the door. David opened it, only to be met by Daniela standing there, her face pale and eyes filled with regret. She looked at him with pleading eyes, her voice shaky as she begged for forgiveness. "David," she said, her tone desperate, "I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake. Please, forgive me." David stared at her for a long moment, memories of the betrayal flashing in his mind. Finally, he shook his head, his voice firm. "It's too late, Daniela. I've moved on with someone better, someone who truly understands me." With those words, he gently closed the door, leaving the past behind him. David and Jane soon married, their union a true testament to the power of love rooted in sincerity, hard work, and genuine connection. Their relationship was built on trust, respect, and unwavering support for one another. They worked together, side by side, building a life filled with happiness, love, and fulfillment. They knew that true love wasn't measured by wealth, but by the authenticity and devotion they shared.
Thank you for watching. Tell us your opinion in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel Chukwudi Studio at Chukwudi.